PlayStation just declared war against Steam and it's only going to get more aggressive from here. Something seismic just happened in the console wars and I do not think enough people are talking about what it actually means, because on the surface this looks like Sony making a sensible business decision, but when you zoom out and look at the landscape around it, what you're really looking at is PlayStation drawing a line in the sand and declaring war on Steam in a way the industry has not seen since the original console wars of the 90s. As of the first week of March 2026, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier has confirmed that Sony no longer plans to release its big PlayStation 5 first-party single-player games on PC. Ghost of Yotei, Saros, and the titles that follow them will remain locked to PlayStation hardware. The era of patient PC gamers waiting 12 to 18 months and then picking up a PlayStation exclusive on Steam for a modest discount, well, yeah, that era is, at least for now, completely and officially over. So let's dig into the emerging situation, explore why it's happening and what it means for the future of gaming. I am Lady Decade, and if you like your gaming industry analysis sharp, honest and completely free of corporate spin, then hit that subscribe button, because today we are talking about why PlayStation just declared war on Steam and why the timing of this decision is no coincidence whatsoever. The gaming industry is going through one of its most dramatic and consequential periods in decades, and that means there has never been a better time to be playing some genuinely great games as a way to decompress from all of the corporate chaos. Use my links below to get 31% off the critically acclaimed Resident Evil Requiem, a mental 91% off the amazing Streets of Rage 4, and even huge discounts on pre-orders such as 33% off Fatal Frame 2 Remake, which comes out this week. 28% off Monster Hunter Stories 3, which also comes out this week, and up to 90% off thousands more games. Every single purchase through my links helps support this channel directly, and if you really love what I do here, you can gain access to my behind the scenes cosplay library and a whole lot more. For example, I've also started posting outfit of the episode photos in my all new style gallery, and today I am Lady Red. I love speaking gaming with you lot over there, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. As mentioned, according to the Bloomberg report, Sony's decision regarding the release of future titles exclusively on their own hardware applies specifically to first-party single-player titles going forward. Online multiplayer games, the live service titles like Marathon and Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, will allegedly still release across multiple platforms, including PC, and externally developed games that PlayStation publishes, things like, Death Stranding and Kenna Scars of Cosmora, are also still expected to land on PC. So this is not the scorched earth, nothing leaves a PlayStation ecosystem declaration. It sounds like it's something more targeted and more surgical than that, and the targeting tells you something important about the reasoning behind it. The reasoning that this has been reported is twofold. First, there is apparently a faction within PlayStation that has been arguing for quite some time that putting their prestige single-player titles on PC is actively undermining the PlayStation 5's value proposition, that it erodes the sense of urgency around owning the hardware, and that in a market where console sales are increasingly competitive, you genuinely cannot afford to let the thing that makes your box special be available on a machine people already own. Second, and this is where it gets really interesting, the Bloomberg report directly references Microsoft's next console, Project Helix, as a factor. And this is where the story stops being about Sony protecting its brand image and starts being about PlayStation reading the room and realising that the living room gaming landscape is about to change in ways that would make their previous PC porting strategy completely untenable. Let's talk about Project Helix first. On the 4th of March 2026, the new head of Xbox, Asher Sharma, officially confirmed that the next Xbox console will integrate both console and PC games. Jez Corden at Windows Central, who has been leading the reporting on this for over a year, has stated clearly that Project Helix will be the most open Xbox ever, with the ability to run Windows and support multiple storefronts, including Steam and the Epic Games Store. You can, according to these reports, exit out to Windows on the thing, which means that if Sony had continued porting their prestige single-player titles to Steam, those games would theoretically have been playable on Microsoft hardware via a Microsoft-manufactured living room console. Think about that for a moment. Think about how completely absurd that situation would have been from PlayStation's perspective. And then there is Valve, which announced the Steam Machine back in November 2025, a new living room console designed to run Steam OS and bring the full Steam library directly to your television. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, hang on, Valve tried this exact same thing before. The original Steam machines launched back in 2015. They were widely considered a flop. Steam OS at the time was not ready for everyday use. The hardware was inconsistent across manufacturers, and Valve themselves were not particularly attentive to the ecosystem after launch. And you would be completely right about all of that, but here is why 2026 is a fundamentally different situation. Valve spent the decades between those original Steam machines and now doing something extremely smart, which is that they built and iterated on the Steam Deck, a portable device that took everything that went wrong in 2015 and methodically fixed it. SteamOS is now a genuinely polished, consumer-ready operating system. Valve's Proton compatibility layer means that the vast majority of the Steam catalog runs on it without issue, and the company used the Steam Deck's commercial performance to prove the concept at scale before committing to the living room. This isn't 2015. Valve has done its homework, and an ex-Blizzard executive quoted this week put it very bluntly: Valve rarely makes mistakes. And Sony understands that. The new Steam machine, confirmed for spring of 2026, runs on a semi-custom AM2 Zen 4 CPU with RDNA 3 graphics capable of 4K gaming at 60 FPS, and it is explicitly positioned as a direct competitor to the PS5 in the living room space. Valve even stood firm on its 2026 launch window as recently as the 6th of March, despite ongoing memory and storage shortage challenges. This is not a rumor or a concept, this thing is real. It is coming, and Sony clearly knows it. So you have a brand new Xbox that essentially runs Windows and you can access Steam, and you have a brand new Valve console that plays the entire Steam library from your sofa. So if PlayStation had kept putting its single-player titles on Steam, those games would have been playable on all three of those devices simultaneously. At that point, what are you actually selling with a PlayStation 5? What is its unique proposition? What is the thing that makes someone spend their money on your specific box when two of the other boxes in the room already play the games you make? I think PlayStation's decision here is not only logical, but it is arguably the only defensible strategic choice available to them, given the landscape that they are operating in. We're entering a period where the traditional console market, as it has existed since the 90s, is under genuine existential pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Microsoft is essentially abandoning the traditional console model entirely in favour of a hybrid PC console device. Valve is building a living room PC that sidesteps the entire console ecosystem completely, and Nintendo, as always, is doing its own gloriously weird thing over in the corner and somehow printing money regardless of what anyone else does. In that environment, the only path that makes sense for PlayStation is to lean harder into the one thing none of those competitors can replicate, which is the exclusivity of their first-party software. You cannot play Saros on a Steam machine. You cannot play Ghost of Yotei on Project Helix. You can only play those games if you own a PlayStation, and in a crowded living room where there might eventually be 3 or 4 different gaming boxes competing for the same patch of carpet, you can only get this here is an enormously powerful proposition. Aside from exclusivity being a driving factor towards this change in approach, the Bloomberg report notes that PC ports of PlayStation exclusives have not historically sold particularly well, and that the longer tail console sales for single-player games were reportedly being impacted by the knowledge that a PC port was coming. So, viewed through that lens, Sony is not being irrational or anti-consumer here. They're responding to data that tells them their porting strategy was actively cannibalizing their own hardware business, and a Sony that cannot sell PS5 consoles is a Sony that eventually cannot fund the prestige single-player titles that make the porting strategy worth having in the first place. The whole thing is circular. I know a lot of people will hear all of this and immediately react with frustration because the instinct is to frame exclusivity as anti-consumer, as a cynical tactic designed to force people into expensive hardware purchases for no reason other than corporate greed. And I understand that instinct, but I think it is worth pushing back on it just a little bit because the picture is more complicated than that, and the competition argument is actually quite compelling if you are willing to sit with it properly. The idea that exclusivity is inherently bad for consumers collapses somewhat when you consider what genuine hardware competition actually produces. The PS4 era, as an example, when Sony had almost no meaningful competition from a creatively bankrupt Microsoft, gave us fantastic games, but it also gave us a fairly comfortable and unchallenged PlayStation that did not have to fight particularly hard for your money. The moment competition intensifies, platform holders have to justify themselves more aggressively, which historically means investing more in the quality of their exclusive software, pricing their hardware more competitively, and improving the services that they offer. If PlayStation is now doubling down on exclusivity because it is facing genuine competition from Valve's Steam Machine and a revamped Xbox, then the competitive pressure on Sony to make those exclusives genuinely unmissable is higher than it has been in years. That is a dynamic that over time tends to result in better games. The argument also holds up in the broader historical context of the console industry. The periods that produced the most creatively rich and diverse gaming libraries were also the periods of the most intense platform competition. The PS1 and N64 era, the PS2 and original Xbox era, the golden age of the PS3 versus the Xbox 360. In every one of those periods, the exclusives that each platform produced to justify its own existence drove the quality of the entire medium upwards. The studios had to deliver something that was genuinely impossible to get anywhere else. That dynamic is about to reassert itself, and if you care about the quality of big-budget single-player games, then you should at least be cautiously optimistic about what it might produce. But here's the part where I have to be honest with you, because there is a group of people for whom none of those silver linings particularly matter to in the slightest, and they deserve to have their position acknowledged fairly and clearly rather than swept under a pile of strategic analysis. PC gamers are the ones who are going to lose from this, full stop. And there's no way to dress that up into something more palatable. For the better part of 6 years, PC players have had something genuinely valuable, a pathway to PlayStation's prestige single-player catalogue without needing to buy additional hardware. Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us, Returnal, all of these eventually made their way to Steam, often in technically excellent versions, with unlocked frame rates and proper PC feature support, and PC gamers embraced them enthusiastically. That pathway is now closed, and the games that would have come next, including Ghost of Yotei and whatever follows Saros, will not be coming to Steam under the current strategy. For someone who games exclusively on PC and has no interest in or budget for dedicated console hardware, that is a genuine and meaningful loss that cannot be softened. So I want to dive into that side of things a little bit further. I think the discourse around this story has sometimes drifted into territory that dismisses PC gamers' frustration as entitlement, which I actually do find completely unfair. These are players who had a reasonable expectation set over half a decade of consistent PC releases, who may have had gaming hardware decisions based on that expectation, and who are now being told that the goalposts have moved for strategic reasons that have nothing to do with them personally. This is not a trivial thing to brush off. The frustration is legitimate, and the fact that Sony's decision makes business sense does not mean that the people who bear the cost of it are wrong to be annoyed about it. And if you want a sense of just how uncomfortable Sony's position here actually is, consider the observation that has been doing the rounds since the story broke, which is that there is arguably no clean outcome available to them. If they keep releasing games on PC, they generate more revenue per title, but gradually erode the reason to own a PlayStation, especially once a Steam machine is sitting in the same living room. If they stop, they protect the hardware business but walk away from what would have been tens of millions of dollars in additional game sales. It is, as some have put, a situation where they lose money either way, but they are just choosing which kind of loss they can live with. That framing is genuinely useful because it reframes Sony's decision not as corporate greed or a calculated attack on PC gaming, but as a company making a difficult call under real competitive pressure. And getting annoyed at them for that is actually understandable, but it is worth understanding the corner they have found themselves backed into before you decide how angry to be. Bearing this in mind, what I think we are actually witnessing here is the opening shot of a new console war, one that looks quite different from the last few generations, but is in some fundamental ways a return to the kind of intense, high-stakes platform competition that defined the industry at its most creatively vital. The landscape going into the next hardware cycle is genuinely fascinating. You have PlayStation doubling down hard on the thing that it has always been its core proposition: prestige, first-party single-player exclusives that are simply not available anywhere else. You have Xbox retreating from the traditional console model entirely and pivoting towards openness, positioning Project Helix as an all-in-one device that plays everything from every ecosystem and competing on access rather than exclusivity. And then you have Valve, the company that has spent decades dominating PC gaming through the sheer gravity of its library and its store, now entering the living room hardware race directly with a device that brings all of that to your television. 3 completely distinct propositions. 3 completely different bets on what the future of living room gaming looks like, and only one of those 3 is betting all of that on exclusivity still mattering. PlayStation is betting the whole thing on the idea that a significant number of people will still choose to buy dedicated console hardware specifically and only because of the software available on it. That the pull of a new Naughty Dog game or a new Sony Santa Monica title is strong enough to justify the purchase of a box. Based on the sales history of the PS4 and PS5 eras, that's not an unreasonable bet. The PlayStation brand has demonstrated repeatedly that it can sell tens of millions of units on the strength of its exclusive software alone, but the pressure on those games is to actually deliver, to be genuinely unmissable rather than merely very good. And, well, the stakes have never been higher because the alternative for consumers at the moment has also never been more attractive. Where does this leave all of us? PlayStation just declared war on Steam, and I genuinely believe that that framing is the correct one. This is not just gentle strategic adjustment, this is Sony reading the living room gaming landscape of 2026, seeing 2 new competitors moving into territory that their porting strategy had accidentally prepared them for, and making the preemptive decision to pull their most valuable asset back behind the exclusivity wall before it was too late to do so. It is the right call for PlayStation's business, it is arguably healthy for competition in the long run, and it is a genuinely painful loss for PC gamers who have spent 6 years building PlayStation adjacent libraries on their Steam accounts and are now being told that the party is over. All 3 of those things can be true all at once, and I think the most honest thing that you can say about this moment is that the console wars are finally back. They look different from the last time around, and the next few years of gaming are going to be extraordinarily interesting as a result. The only question left is whether PlayStation's exclusive software can deliver the kind of games that make the whole bet worthwhile, because if the exclusives are not unmissable, the strategy collapses under its very own weight. And given some of the conversations we have been having on this channel recently about the direction of certain PlayStation titles, that question is considerably more open than the strategic logic of this decision might suggest. But that, I think, is a conversation for another video. Don't forget you can use my links below to grab some genuinely brilliant games at incredible prices. This includes the critically acclaimed and newly released Resident Evil Requiem at 31% off, huge discounts on exciting pre-orders such as 32% off Fatal Frame 2 Remake, 27% off Monster Hunter Stories 3, and up to 90% off of thousands more great games. Every purchase helps support this channel, so thank you to anyone who uses those links. And if you really enjoy what I do here, you can also access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more by becoming a backer on my Lady Decade Patreon. As mentioned, I've even started posting outfit of the episode photos in my all new style gallery, so there will always be something fresh up over there. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all again in the next one.